Three, two, one. Perfect. Only 20 seconds into the recording do we finally get to single. All right. Are you ready to start? Oh, let me get something up. Are you good? Do you want to start off the background for this?
Sure.
Okay. Let's firstly change all the stream stuff. Lord 35. MCU and U. 3. Talk shows and podcasts. Okay. I am going to hit live in 3,
Yay!
2, 1. You're live.
Is my mic live too?
Yeah, you're live. Speak.
Oh, it's actually time?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
That's okay. You can edit this part out. Just do an intro.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lords. This is the third part of the MCU and U trilogy. We have, for those who are watching the live stream, or actually if you're watching this later on YouTube, you can see the wonderful artwork that Mellow Fellowship did. It looks fantastic. I think it's hilarious, and I hope you guys really enjoy, because we're going to dive into some of these wonderful films. Atlas, tonight, would you take it away?
I will. I'm also very happy in the artwork that I'm Doctor Strange. I think that's great. But yes, so this is part 3. Now, the first part of the Marvel MCU podcast, we did 6 movies, the whole phase 1. The second time we did the whole phase 2.
That's right.
Phase 3 is too long for one episode, so I cut it up. We got 6 movies in this one that we'll be covering. So the 6 movies are Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Thor Ragnarok, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man Homecoming, and an ending with Black Panther, which will start off the next part with Avengers, which I think works.
Right. Okay. I mean, you're right. This is a lot of movies.
Yeah, and I think having Avengers as a starting point works because it's going to be such a long episode, the long description. I mean, Civil War is the longest part of this whole episode, which is the first movie we're covering.
Right.
So let's just jump in there. If you remember from the last 2 episodes, I go over the movie. My format is I go over the movie, like describe basically what it is, and then we talk about some of the comics and where these characters come from in the comics, and then we talk about the movie itself, go over the plot of the movie and what we thought of the movie.
That's right. Hello? Oh no, did we lose Atlas again? Did his internet go out?
Sorry, my mic just decided to disconnect. That's back.
Oh. Okay, I was like, oh, what happened?
Great technical issue. Don't worry. Internet's still here this time. Don't disconnect mid-episode. All right, so I'm going to get started going over Captain America Civil War, which is
good.
Yeah, this is the first film of the Phase 3, which was a big bang to launch Phase 3 with.
Yes.
And this is Captain America Civil War, to be clear. This is the 3rd Captain America movie, which is also the 13th film in the MCU. The first film of Phase 3, and one of my favorite movies of the entire MCU.
I've watched this one over quite a few times because I just like how it's almost like a Avengers light movie because everyone's in it still.
Yeah, it basically is an Avengers. This is basically Avengers 3. And it's based on one of the most popular comic stories of all time, which is of the same name, Civil War. But for the comic book part of this, we've gone over most of the main characters, so I'm going to be going over 3 characters in the comic book origins, 2 who were introduced in this film, Black Panther and Spider-Man, and then the main villain, Baron Zemo.
Right.
So for the comics part, we're going to start off with Black Panther, which was a Stan Lee created famous superhero that a lot of us know now, but even before the movies, he was a very well-known superhero.
Yes.
And he was...
I knew a Black Panther.
Yeah, I knew about him, too. I always thought his costume was one of the coolest costumes of all time as a kid. So I was always a big Black Panther fan. But his first appearance was in July 1966 in Fantastic Four, issues number 52 and 53. Stan Lee said he created the hero because he wanted more African and African American characters in comics. Jack Kirby, his artist, also claimed credit for creating the character, saying that there was no black characters in his comics and demanded some be added. Now, I think the most likely answer is they both had a lot to do with it because they were partners.
Yeah.
And since they worked together on most of these heroes, written by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, I think it's just the same thing. But the result was a very positive feedback from this character, and Black Panther was really popular. They were the highest selling issues of Fantastic Four at the time.
Hell yeah.
So his character is a man named T'Challa from the mysterious African nation of Wakanda, which turns out to be basically a sci-fi paradisical land where they live in what looks like to be hundreds of years in the future to the rest of the world, thanks to their stores of an extraterrestrial material known as vibranium. T'Challa is the leader of the country, which gains the title known as Black Panther, and you then ingest a rare flower known as the heart-shaped herb, which permanently enhances your physical abilities. He also relies on his mastery of science and combat training to keep his country safe, as well as leaving Wakanda for times to help the world as a superhero. After his initial appearance in the Fantastic Four, he would appear alongside Cap in Tales of Suspense number 97 through 99 and in Captain America issue number 100, which was a big deal. That was like a big issue. Black Panther showed up fighting alongside Cap, which is pretty cool. He would then leave Wakanda and join the Avengers in Avengers number 53 in 1968 and be a recurring main character for a few years. He would receive his first solo story in one of my favorite titles, which not only sounds a little racist, but just like I think it's because it's right after Vietnam. The comic title is Jungle Action. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that name. His first solo story would be Jungle Action number 5 in 1973, but it was just a reprint of a Panther-focused Avenger story in Avengers issue number 62. After this new story was printed, however, Don McGregor would write a story called Panther's Rage in the Jungle Action comic series, and this storyline was a very popular, very major moment in comic book history, because it would be the first time a story arc would carry over like a lot of issues, and is commonly considered to be the first graphic novel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was 13 issues of a story, and it was insanely popular. And it exposed many readers to the Black Panther, but also the comic format that this was done in. And it was even followed by another of the same, which was a 17-issue story in Panther versus the Klan. That's with the K. And it should also be in Jungle Action. And this format would become the norm for comics to this day. This is how comics are written now. There'll be a huge story arc that'll be like, like somewhere between 6 and 12 issues, and then after that's done, you can usually buy that story arc in a single book.
Right.
This format would become the norm, like I just mentioned, and after the low sales of Jungle Action, Black Panther would end up getting its own title series, just called Black Panther, written by Jack Kirby. And this would be his first role back at Marvel, having left Marvel for DC. So... that was a big drama thing that happened back in the 70s. As Jack Kirby ditched Marvel and joined DC Comics. But he didn't last too long there. He came back in the 70s, and came back with his 15-issue run of Black Panther. Which he didn't like. He didn't like being on Black Panther. He complained about it because he wanted to make a new character. He didn't want to be like put on some already existing character.
Yeah, right.
So, he was upset with that, but it ended up getting canceled after 15 issues. Despite high sales for college students, it didn't have high sales for all the demographics they wanted, so they ended up canceling the series. Black Panther would return again, however, with his own solo series in 1998, which is Black Panther Volume 3, under the Marvel Knights imprint, which are some of my favorite comics, which is kind of like the more serious, like dark side of Marvel. And this was actually due to Marvel filing for bankruptcy.
Oh dear!
And and a company made by I think it was Quesada. His company came in and made the Marvel Knights brand, which basically they were allowed to rent Marvel characters and print them as their own comics for a little while. And Black Panther is one of them. But a lot of the Marvel Knights characters are like Morbius, everyone's favorite movie, Black Panther, Moon Knight, Blade. They a lot of those kind of like darker, kind of like gritty characters.
Right. I do love,
Yeah.
fucking Morbius, dude.
We're morbid on. Black Panther had multiple volumes, still has his own series to this day, as well as featuring heavily in many other series, especially after being debuted in the MCU. But his solo comic today is one of the top selling at Marvel. So he's a very popular character. Everyone loves Black Panther.
Yes, it's true.
Now, for Spider-Man, I don't think I need much of an explanation about who he is. Peter Parker.
Right.
High school student gets bit by a radioactive spider, gets the ability to climb on walls. He has highly increased strength and agility. Uses this thing called spider sense, which lets him sense danger before it arrives. But for the comics, he first appeared in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in 1962, created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. This is a big deal for a comic book protagonist as a high school character because teenage heroes were only sidekicks at this point in the comics. Right. So Stan Lee intentionally chose to call him Spider-Man, not Spider-Boy, because he wanted the comic series to show Peter aging and growing up with superpowers as a whole like side story, right?
Which is great, and that's one reason why he's still one of the most popular characters to this day.
100%. The character was also originally rejected for a solo series by the executives because they claimed people hate spiders and no one would want a book based on him.
Well...
Yeah. So he was put in the Amazing Fantasy book as a side story, and only because in that issue, number 15, was already known to be the last issue of the book before it got canceled.
Oh, I think you talked about this once before.
Yeah, and it was getting canceled, so this guy's like, okay, fine, put your little character, your little Spider-Man character in this book. Turns out it sold so well that he was greenlit for a solo series and would start the craze we know as Spider-Man. And part of the reason that this solo book got made is because the title said featuring the Amazing Spider-Man whose adventures will continue in the next issue, knowing there wasn't going to be a next issue. And so people were like, well, now we got to know what happened because we have to on a cliffhanger kind of thing. So now it got like really popular. And so this solo series launched out and it sold like crazy. The solo series Amazing Spider-Man began in 1963 and became Marvel's top-selling series almost immediately. The character would become an Avenger. He's a TV star, you know. We got Japanese Spider-Man. We had a live-action American Spider-Man show. He even got a movie star, which his movie made by Sam Raimi, you know, the Spider-Man trilogy in the 2000s. Came out in 2002. Saved Marvel from going out of business. It was about to go out. Marvel was like ending that year. It was kind of like we have a last chance to get this business off the ground, and so they used the Spider-Man movie came out, ended up getting a lot of
so good.
Yeah, it was amazing, and for the time, it was unprecedentedly good for like a Marvel movie. Like Marvel movies have been pretty bad, and Spider-Man came out, which just like punched everyone in the face how good it was.
And the first two are really good.
Yeah, the first two were good. The third one's like not the worst, but it's such compared to the other two. It's more like the movies before Spider-Man. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
So to this day, he is still Marvel's top-selling hero. I'm not going too heavily into him because I could go on too long, and I probably will do an episode at some point on Spider-Man, just like the previous Batman episode.
Right.
So like I'm not gonna go like super deep into Spider-Man. Also, we already know Spider-Man. We all know who Spider-Man is. So
right.
We can carry that. So
the most popular one.
Yeah, he was even Marvel's logo. Like for a long time in the comics, it was a little Spider-Man icon was the logo of Marvel.
It's synonymous. It's like the Mario hat.
Yeah, 100%. Spider-Man is Marvel, which I still think is very weird because I kind of agree. I would have agreed with the executive back then. Spider-Man, like who wants to read a spider?
Yeah, like if you don't know who Spider-Man is already, that doesn't sound appealing. And
it's so weird because spiders are such a hated thing. Generally, that's like you would have thought that Spider-Man would be the big home run. Anyway, on to our last character for the Civil War comic. We have Baron Zemo, who is one of my favorite villains. So Baron Zemo is a legacy villain in Marvel. He first appeared in Avengers 6 in 1964, the original Heinrich Zemo, and his son Helmut Zemo have both taken up the mantle of Baron Zemo. Helmut Zemo, the one being in Civil War.
Right, yep.
So they both have been major adversaries of Captain America, as well as leading the infamous villain team, Masters of Evil. And to me, if you were to ask who Cap's main villain is, I've always said Zemo, not Red Skull. Zemo to me has always been like the main nemesis of Captain America, from what I knew of Captain America. Zemo was made by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby for the Avengers, but he was retroactively added into Cap's history when he was introduced as having worked for the Nazis in World War II. He invented a super adhesive known as Adhesive X, which, quote, could not be dissolved, unquote, and planned to use it against the American troops, but was stopped by Captain America, who would throw his shield at the vat of chemicals, which would then spill on top of Zemo, leaking into his mask, permanently attaching the pink mask to his face. Yeah, so that's why he always has his mask on. Zemo would leave his wife and son in South America after World War II and become extremely abusive to them, eventually leaving them to be supervillain full-time, founding the organization known as the Masters of Evil, purposely doing all they can to just harass and kill Avengers. His son, Helmut, as we mentioned before, is the one in the MCU, started following in Dad's footsteps, but would eventually change his tune and lead the famous team known as the Thunderbolts, which we're actually getting an MCU project. I think it's a show soon.
That's right.
Which is a group of villains being used for good under the guidance of General Thunderbolt Ross, a.k.a. the Red Hulk. Besides this, Zemo will continue to go back to villainous ways over and over again, though not nearly as bad as his Nazi father, and sometimes even flop back into hero roles, including his mind being stuck in the hero known as Citizen V, which he used as a good for some time. So Zemo is a very conflicted good and evil character. Like, he's pretty much, he always goes bad because he's Baron Zemo, leader of Master of Evil. It's kind of like his thing. Right. But, like, he does good things sometimes, and sometimes he'll even be like to the other villains, like, yo, relax. Like, what's wrong with you? But yeah.
A reasonable villain is sometimes some of the best and most compelling.
So that's all we have.
You almost agree with them.
Yeah,
Sorry,
there's especially if you watch Falcon Winter Soldier. If you watch Falcon Winter Soldier, you'll see Zemo a lot in his.
I mean, it kind of is Captain Falcon, though.
Yeah. But like, I'm thinking like Super Smash Brothers for Captain Falcon.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, in that show, you see Zemo kind of come out as his own, like more actual comic booky Zemo, where he does flip flop, good and bad. But now we're gonna go to the movie. So the movie was directed by the Russo brothers again, who came back from. They started in Winter Soldier, and then they did Avengers, and now they're back in this. Or they haven't done Avengers yet. They did. They just did these two Cap movies, but they'll do Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame.
Infinity Game,
basically. This film would star Chris Evans as Captain America again, alongside basically the entire Avengers roster, making this movie a mini Avengers film in itself. But the film introduces Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther, Tom Holland as Spider-Man, and Daniel Bruhl as Helmut Zemo. So the film, going over the plot, opens up in 1991 with Hydra operatives inside a Russian military reviving the Winter Soldier after using a set of trigger words to ensure his loyalty as a product of brainwashing. He is then ordered to intercept a car and execute its occupants, so we don't see who it is. It's a big mystery.
Uh-oh.
We are then taken to present day where Captain America, Black Widow, Falcon, and Scarlet Witch are in Lagos, Nigeria, tracking down Brock Rumlow, aka Crossbones, from Captain America Winter Soldier. After getting confronted, he attempts suicide via a bomb vest, taking out Cap in the process, but in the nick of time is stopped by Scarlet Witch. But she then loses control of her powers and destroys a nearby building, killing several Wakandan relief aid workers.
Oof. Big oofs, big L's.
Big oofs. And then we cut immediately to MIT, where Tony Stark demonstrates his BARF technology, which is a piece of tech used to relive old memories and then after showing it off, he gives all the students attending the lecture donations to fully pay their school fees. Wow, what a great guy that Tony Stark, right?
Oh, good old philanthropist.
Immediately after that, though, he is confronted by a woman named Miriam Sharp, who tells him a story of her son being killed in the battle with Ultron and Sokovia, and Tony gets shaken up when she says she blames her son's death on him and not Ultron. A month after the Lagos incident, General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross meets with the Avengers in their base and informs them the United Nations has decided the Avengers can no longer be allowed to operate privately. They have to sign the Sokovia Accords, approved by 117 countries, which will establish the international panel on who will control the Avengers. The team gets divided over this act, Iron Man supporting government oversight after feeling guilty about Ultron, while Captain America feels this will cause the Avengers to be compromised, such as S.H.I.E.L.D. was by Hydra. Meanwhile, we see a retired Russian officer named Karpov being ambushed by Helmut Zemo, asking for information regarding a 1991 mission, and when Karpov refuses, he is killed by Zemo, but he gets his little diary. He has a little diary about his missions. During the Accords debate, Steve learns Peggy Carter had died in her sleep and leaves for her funeral in London, which he then attends, and then learns during the eulogy that his former neighbor, Agent 13, aka Sharon Carter, is Peggy Carter's great niece.
That's a weird romance.
It is a weird romance. Yeah. This emboldens Cap to not sign the Accords due to her eulogy about doing never backing down in what you believe in.
Right.
Wanda is at the base and finds herself confined by Vision of the facility due to her being unstable after the Lagos incident, which we then cut to Vienna, where the signing of the Accords is set to take place when a terrorist uses a bomb to kill T'Chaka of Wakanda, father to T'Challa, where security footage shows the suspect is none other than Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier. Cap and Falcon team up to find him following a tip from Sharon Carter and end up capturing him, but after a fight with the Black Panther, Cap, Falcon, and Black Panther themselves are arrested for obstruction of justice by Rhodes, aka War Machine. Bucky is then held in a prison in Berlin, where we see Cap and Tony argue about the Accords again, but soon an EMP bomb is set off by Zemo to a power grid outside the prison, exploding the entire power grid and also causing the whole city of Berlin's power to go out.
I remember that.
When Bucky gets released by Zemo during this, he uses the Hydra trigger word to send him on a killing rampage. Captain and Falcon intervene when Falcon goes after Zemo and Cap tries to calm down Bucky. After the fight, Bucky relaxes and tells Cap that Zemo is going to a facility in Siberia where he and 5 other Winter Soldiers were created using Super Soldier Serum that he stole from a vehicle in 1991 on a mission. Cap recruits Hawkeye to free Scarlet Witch, which he does with the help of using Wanda to stop Vision. Falcon recruits Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, to the team. While this is happening, Iron Man gets 36 hours to bring in the Renegade Avengers and assembles Black Widow, Black Panther, War Machine, Vision, and a new recruit named Spider-Man into the mission, where they meet up at Leipzig Airport and they engage in a big battle between the heroes.
One of the coolest fights in the MCU.
100%. It's a great fight.
It's so awesome.
The reason why people like Civil War, like in the comics, is because everyone always had this, who would win in a fight? Captain America or Iron Man? And then they did it. So they did this whole thing. We got to see these heroes pit against each other. And it's the same for the movie. You get to see Spider-Man get beaten by Captain America. You know?
Yeah.
It's a cool little thing. So trying to get to Siberia to stop Zemo, Cap and Bucky head for a Quinjet during the fight, and while the others try to delay Iron Man's team, Black Widow switches sides to join Cap over Iron Man to escape and delays them trying to chase her. While War Machine takes a blast from Vision's Mind Stone, which is meant for Falcon, he survives a fall in the sky but is left paralyzed, which brings the fight to a screeching halt.
Yeah, it's all fun and games until you paralyze your friend.
Yeah, until someone gets seriously wounded. You're like, oh, we're friends, right, still?
Like, what are we doing?
So Cap escapes and they head to Siberia. After the battle, Tony finds evidence that Bucky was framed by Zemo and visits the rest of the Vision's throne. I'm sorry, what did I write down? Well, he visits the rest of the Avengers thrown in the former S.H.I.E.L.D. super prison, the Raft. Tony goes to Siberia while being shadowed by Black Panther the whole time in his secret high-tech Wakandan jet fighter. Iron Man and Cap reconcile in Siberia when they discover Zemo had killed the rest of the Winter Soldiers, and they come to the agreement that, Bucky was set up. And right. Zemo then reveals that he is a Sokovian, and he wants nothing more than to punish the Avengers for the death of his family during Ultron. Zemo showed
triggered good old Tony Stark.
Oh yeah, the triggers Tony Stark was when Zemo shows him a 1991 video mission of Winter Soldier killing his parents.
That's right. Those people at the beginning were Tony's parents all along.
Yes, finally revealing who was in that car in 1991 that was killed by Winter Soldier, which causes Iron Man to go off his rocker and turn against Cap and Bucky, where he blasts off Winter Soldier's bionic arm.
Yeah.
Eventually, Captain America defeats Iron Man, but he says, this is his last words to Cap, that he doesn't deserve the shield. His father deserves it since he made it. Captain agrees, throwing down his shield, saying he is no longer worthy of the title Captain America, and leaves with Bucky. Zemo waits outside and speaks to Black Panther, where T'Challa stops him from killing himself, and then Zemo gets arrested and put under the custody of General Ross. Months later, we see Cap and Bucky have been granted asylum in Wakanda, and Bucky undergoes a cryostasis until his brainwashing can be removed. And that's the end of Civil War. So
It doesn't end on a high.
It doesn't end on a high. No, it ends on a sad note. And I did love this movie, and I still love this movie. We talked about it before. I think this is better than Winter Soldier. Some people think Winter Soldier is better. I prefer Civil War. I think their take on doing Civil War to fit the MCU narrative was fantastic. Like, they did a really good job of twisting what the comic Civil War was into the MCU, which was still about signing something, but it's just they managed to make it fit the MCU better. And I didn't think we would even see this in the movies for like another decade at the time.
Right.
Like, it seemed way too early, but they did it fantastically.
Yeah. Well, what's nice about this is that, like, this is the first part of Phase 3, and then we don't see any reconciliation between any of these heroes. Not even until, I think
it's like Endgame. It's like really when it happens.
It's not, it's really...
Like, Iron Man doesn't even meet Cap again for like 8 movies.
Right. And it's not until he comes back from space.
Yeah, and Captain America in Infinity War is technically not Captain America. He's Nomad, which is his non-Captain America superhero identity. Which
is still pretty sick.
Which is pretty cool, yeah. So next we have a great film, which I love. I'm pretty sure you love too, which is Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange was the second Phase 2 movie, 14th Marvel film, and he was a lesser-known hero at the time, but still pretty important. Like, he was, if you were a comic reader, you knew Doctor Strange was. But as far as like general populace, I don't think a lot of people knew who he was. He was a comic hero who used the mastery of sorcery and magics to take down enemies. So obviously for this part of the comics, we're going to go over Doctor Strange, where he came from, what his deal is. Doctor Strange started off as a neurosurgeon who was one of, if not the best in the world. Unfortunately, a terrible car accident leaves him with broken hands and fingers, like, bent in all directions, stopping him from being very bad hand injuries, stopping him from being able to be a surgeon ever again. So he travels the world looking for a cure and ends up meeting an ancient wizard known as the Ancient One and becomes his student, eventually becoming such a powerful wizard he ends up becoming the Sorcerer Supreme himself, which is kind of
he's basically like Magic Tony Stark.
Yes.
He's a witty, sarcastic asshole and the best at what he does, and he also has a goatee.
Yeah, he's very, very much like Magic Tony Stark. And like his personality and Tony Stark's personality match up almost perfectly.
That makes for great interactions in Infinity War.
So he was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Doctor Strange would debut in Strange Tales number 110 in July of 1963. This book would be split with the Human Torch. We actually talked about this book, I think, in the Captain America in Phase 1.
Yeah,
we talked about this book a little bit. But Doctor Strange really stole the show in this issue. He became much more popular than Human Torch did because of this issue. But Doctor Strange was a fan favorite right off the bat, and Stan Lee said this character was inspired by Chandu the Magician, who was a 1930s radio program.
All right.
Which I looked up. You can find some recordings of it. He sounds like Doctor Strange.
That's funny.
So Doctor Strange would use magical artifacts with wild names such as the Eye of Agamotto, the Crimson Bands of Satorak, the Wand of Watum. And if these weren't colorful enough for you, his mystical-sounding phrase, Hoary Hosts of Hogoth, really put icing on the cake for how weird and like magical and mystical his character was.
Right.
Strange was popular enough for a solo series that would run 15 issues, ending in 1969, and then reappear alongside popular mutant Iceman in a split book once again in 1971. He went from splitting a book with a fire guy to splitting the book with an ice guy.
Yeah.
In 1974 to 87, readers got a second volume of Doctor Strange titled Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts. So obviously 74 to 87, that's a long run. So Doctor Strange was selling well in the 80s. He would become very popular in another magical series called The Tomb of Dracula, number 44, would cross over with Doctor Strange, that was another popular series, and everyone loves crossovers. So it made Doctor Strange even bigger. Strange has stayed a mainstay in the Marvel Comics to this day. Before his MCU debut, he was a big favorite among fans, but in like the 2000s and early 2010s, he mostly was a support character. Like even during Civil War, which was probably the biggest 2000s, I would say, comic moment for Marvel.
Right.
He refused to pick a side. He was a neutral party. He stayed in his lane. Like, I'm just gonna watch the world for magical invasions. You guys do your thing.
That's kind of how I always see him, though, because he's not like an Avenger, but he just will help out.
Yeah, basically, yes. He isn't really an Avenger. And after his 2006 movie, however, he started becoming a much bigger front role character in Marvel, and actually ends up to this day becoming one of Marvel's top 5 selling comics.
Oh, wow.
People love Doctor Strange, which I get it. I also love Doctor Strange.
Right. I'm glad to know he's that popular, because I didn't really know much about him until it was. I knew of him before the announcement. I think it was because of the old Xbox 360 Marvel game.
Oh, Ultimate Alliance.
Yeah.
Yes, he was in Ultimate Alliance. Yeah, he's a popular. I think people have always kind of liked him, but yeah, recently he's just kind of shot up in sales because I think people really like Doctor Strange movie. Benedict Cumberbatch Doctor Strange is so good. And and the sequel that just came out too is fantastic. I absolutely love that movie. So
still got to see it, but it's going to be out in Disney Plus soon. So I'm just
next week. Yeah. So now you know when we're filming this episode. So let's go to the movies. This movie was directed by Scott Derrickson, who's a small horror film director, who made small films such as Hellraiser, Inferno, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and Sinister. He would be chosen to take the Marvel into its biggest trip yet with Doctor Strange. The movie would star Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, Rachel McAdams as Christine Palmer, his love interest, Benedict Wong as Wong, Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One, Chiwetel Ejiofor as Mordo, and Mads Mikkelsen as Calicus, the main villain of the film. And also, fun fact, if you didn't know, Benedict Cumberbatch also is the voice of Dormammu in this film.
Oh.
So.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he's the voice of Dormammu, which is great. He plays the main villain and pretty much the arch enemy. This story begins in Kathmandu, Nepal, where a group of rogue sorcerers infiltrate the sorcerer city of Kamartaj. The group leader, Calicus, Caecilius, I think it's I say it, Caecilius, that's it, Caecilius, steals the forbidden book owned by his former mentor, the Ancient One. She fights them off, but Caecilius escapes with the book. And next we see the acclaimed Doctor Strange in Metro General Hospital in New York City. And we get quite a bit of little background where we see he's like the best surgeon in the world. Yeah. He's crushed on this girl named Christine, but they broke up because they couldn't, he was too egotistical, too arrogant kind of thing. And then he's on his way to a guest talk where he is like the guest of honor to get an award, but he gets into a horrific car accident on the way. And while he survives, his hands are permanently damaged. He learns that no physical therapy will help him, and his former lover and coworker Christine tries to help him move on, but he is so desperate he tries experimental surgeries, ends up using all the money he has, and then takes a
Right.
Yeah, he goes broke, can't live in his New York apartment anymore, so he takes a pilgrimage to Kamartaj, where he gets taken in by the Ancient One and Mordo, and begins being shown the power of magic and learning that it's real. He undergoes training and ends up becoming a very talented sorcerer and secretly reads many forbidden texts, including the ability to bend time using the Eye of Agamotto, where Mordo and the librarian Wong warn him against using such magics as this contains an infinitely dangerous power. Meanwhile, the evil sorcerer Caecilius and his followers use the stolen pages from the book to begin summoning a powerful being known as Dormammu of the Dark Dimension. Where if you're a comic book fan, you know that Dormammu is like Doctor Strange's biggest nemesis.
Yeah, he seemed like he should have been a main villain of an Avengers movie of how gigantic and all powerful he is.
I think he's got his day coming. I think he's actually confirmed to be returning. That Benedict Cumberbatch has cast as his voice again or something, but we'll see where that goes. So the Dark Dimension where Dormammu lives is an area where time does not exist and everyone can live forever. And we find out that Caecilius wants to basically live there, I guess, because in that dimension he thinks his like dead wife and son exists or something without any evidence of this. He just believes that's the case. So that's just he's such a dumb villain. He's a dumb villain in the comics too. Like, I'm glad he's done with. Not going to see him again. Strange and Mordo battle against against Caecilius in New York Sanctum, where Strange gets his famous cloak of levitation. Caecilius reveals at that time that the Ancient One's long life is due to her using Dormammu's power, and then proceeds to mortally wound the Ancient One and escape to Hong Kong. The Ancient One tells Strange that he too will have to break the rules before she dies soon after of her wounds in the bed. Strange and Mordo arrive in Hong Kong and find Wong to be dead and the Sanctum destroyed, and the Dark Dimension has begun destroying the Earth, eating away at it from space, with Dormammu basically arriving from the sky. Strange then taps into the Eye of Agamotto to revert time and save Wong before being killed, and he ends up creating an infinite time loop in the Dark Dimension that traps him and Dormammu forever. Eventually, after we don't know how long, Dormammu ends up realizing what's going on and agrees to leave Earth if Strange breaks the time loop, and if he takes Caecilius and the Zealots with him. Disgusted by Strange's methods, Mordo severs all ties to Camartage and departs on his own. Wong reveals the Eye of Agamotto is powered by an Infinity Stone known as the Time Stone. And then, months later, Strange is visited by Thor, who has brought his brother Loki to Earth in search of Odin. Strange agrees to help, and then we cut to the final credits. That's Doctor Strange.
Man, I like Doctor Strange a lot.
It's a great movie. It's a very good origin movie.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun. And again, like, you know, because I went in kind of thinking, like, isn't this guy basically Tony Stark but magic? And I'm like, yeah, he is, but I'm here for it. Because he does have his own individual sort of, like, stuff, for sure. Like,
very much.
He's a more sarcastic asshole genius, whereas Tony Stark is more of the cocky type, you know.
Yeah,
genius.
Because unlike, I mean, it does happen to both of them, but Doctor Strange got like really humbled by the car accident, so his personality like shifted drastically when he became Sorcerer Supreme, and also he has a bigger responsibility than Iron Man ever did, and he takes it more seriously.
Right? Yeah.
Because the job of the Sorcerer Supreme is to protect Earth from all magical threats, which is basically the plot of the sequel, Multiverse of Madness. Because a lot of people try to invade Earth from places like Dormammu. But yeah,
that sounds great.
I think this movie was great. They introduced Mordo, which is I would say Mordo is his direct nemesis. Like they're just two human sorcerers who never stop fighting each other throughout time. Dormammu is more of like the overarching nemesis of like all magic characters, but he's like the big bad, you know. Dormammu's like I'm overseeing everything and making sure no one like can stop me. I'm this giant, literally like 30-foot tall magic creature. So they both were introduced. Dormammu, I think we're gonna get to see in the movies pretty soon as his like actual comic book looking self with his like armor on and his like red robe and stuff that he wears, and his giant flaming skull head. I think that's going to be coming, but we'll see. I think Midnight Suns is coming, which is a movie or a team led by Doctor Strange. So,
Oh.
I'm not going to spoil the new Doctor Strange movie and say why I think that's happening, but it's happening. All right, so the next movie, we got another 2017 film, which is another one that I love, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So this is the third movie of Phase 3, the 15th movie in the MCU, which makes the 15th movie we're talking about, and the second movie of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. We already went over the origin of all the Guardians, including Mantis, who's introduced in this film. So for the comic part, I'm basically just talking about Ego, which is the comic's antagonist. So not much to talk about in the comics here. So introduced in September of 1966, we saw Ego, the living planet created by Jack Kirby, when he showed up in the Mighty Thor issue number 132. Ego was a result of a creation of Galactus in the comics, where Kirby really wanted to expand the Marvel space mythology. He saw, which it is now, he saw, like, there's Marvel on Earth, but let's do Marvel in space. Where we have all these different cosmic characters. And nowadays, like, there's people who only read Cosmic Marvel. Like Nova, Guardians of the Galaxy, the Annihilators, Silver Surfer. There's a bunch of, and Thor too. There's a bunch of like space Marvel stuff.
Yeah, which is great because it helps. It helps explain a lot of things more. Like,
yes,
hey, Infinity Stones came from all over the universe. Okay, thanks. It's not just an Earth thing.
Yeah, and certain characters like Nova, for example, is a human from Earth because he picked up a Nova Corps helmet. Like there's it's you never even have to like look at Earth Marvel. You can just read Space Marvel and never, you know what I mean? There's so much of it. Kirby really saw that as his vision, which he succeeded in, and Ego was part of that. He wanted to make a big, like, threat that's not Galactus, but still, like, almost unreasonably large. So he made a literal planet that's alive. In the comics, Ego was a living planet that would absorb spaceships that approached it in space, and even other planets, as it would move through its home area known as the Black Galaxy, until it eventually had enough energy to build armies of antibodies to conquer other worlds. Thor would end up stopping him from destroying the world of Rigel after the people there, the Rigelians, would pray to Thor for help. Humiliated Ego vowed to never return from his home after he was smacked sense into by Thor, who, I just want to clarify, beat up a planet. And he would return to his home, the Black Galaxy, vowing never to leave. But soon after that, Galactus got his eyes on Ego, because if you know Galactus in the comics, he likes to eat planets. So what better meal than a living planet? And Thor would end up teaming up with Ego to stop Galactus.
Huh.
After that unlikely team-up, a group of aliens known as the Wanderers move on to Ego, who are citizens of Galactus's first meals. So, like, there are these, like, wandering space, like, migrant fleet of aliens that are, like, millions of years old, basically. They've been living on these ships because they're from, like, the Dawn of the Galaxy's races. And they end up living on Ego. He lets them live on his surface after they team up and stop Galactus.
Huh. That's kind of nice of him. After he took a 180.
So, but unfortunately, that ends up backfiring when a Rigelian scientist tries to get a soil sample from Ego and plants it on another planet, and Ego ends up going insane and ends up absorbing all the people living on top of him.
I spoke too soon.
And he ends up being stopped by Thor and Hercules with the help of Galactus. Now, how do they do this? How does Galactus stop a living planet? That's easy, Pat. He attaches a literal giant engine to the South Pole of Ego, launching him through space to where he'll never stop.
Ooh, that's kind of funny.
So
that's a ridiculous. The comic book readers of that must have been like, "You've got to be fucking."
Yeah, well, this is the '60s, so like I feel like it fits in more. Like, I got it, and I can just see old pink Galactus just slapping a big engine on his butt.
See you later, sucker.
Yeah, so he's like, Ego goes flying through space forever. He does show up in the comics again when he gets it off of himself and goes crazy, or he ends up orbiting Earth. He's not as big as Earth, to be clear. He's a living planet. He's like bigger than the moon, but he's not like as big as Earth. He's still massive.
Right.
So he starts orbiting Earth and like threatens to kill it. You know, he gets stopped by Professor X and the Silver Surfer, weirdly enough. But, you know, in the 2000s and 2020s, he even became a slave to Dormammu recently.
Oh,
and yeah, he's like part of the Dark Dimension now. It's weird. He's got a really storied history, and surprise to you,
like it.
He never interacts with the Guardians of the Galaxies, not once.
So this is a very what if story.
Yes, this is the movie way they did with Ego. Like, I think it was a great way to just get Ego in and out of the comics. We don't need a living planet, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just like, I don't know why they did. It's such a weird leap to put Ego in the Guardian, especially the way they did, making him so integral. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, he's not part of the Guardians at all. He's a Thor villain, and he always has to do with Thor and magic stuff more so than the cosmic stuff in the end. But yeah, so let's go back to the movie. We're going to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 had James Gunn return as a director. With the returning cast of the Guardians, but we did get introduced to Mantis being played by Palm Clementif, I believe is how you say your name. Kurt Russell would play the living planet Ego, which was hilarious, and got a special appearance by Sylvester Stallone as Stackar Ogord, also known as Starhawk. So
I forgot he was in that.
Yeah, he's a superhero. Which do you know about why? Do you know why he's in the movie?
No.
Okay, we're going to talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
So this film starts off with Meredith Quill, Star-Lord's birth mother, being courted by Ego on Earth to the song Brandy, which is always one of my favorite songs ever, by Looking Glass. So
it's a good song.
That was like fantastic for me. So he shows her an alien seedling that he planted in the woods of Missouri. Then cuts 34 years in the future, and we now see the renowned heroes, the Guardians of the Galaxy, 2 months after defeating Ronan the Accuser, who are defending valuable batteries from the Obelisk, which is another classic Guardians villain, in exchange for Nebula from the Sovereign, which is a nation that had captured her following the Battle of Xandar. After defeating the Beast, Rocket steals several batteries because he's Rocket Raccoon, and when the Sovereign discovers this, they attack the Guardian ship and heavily damage the Milano. The Sovereign fleet, however, is then single-handedly destroyed by none other than Ego, who reveals himself to be Peter Quill's father. Ego invites Quill to return to his home, which is a planet in the deep space, he agrees to bring Gamora and Drax with him. But Rocket and Groot have to stay behind to fix the Milano after the attack and guard their prisoner Nebula. We then see Aisha, the head of the Sovereign, who you know, we're trying to take down the Guardians, hire Yondu to capture them. If you remember, Yondu is the blue person who was like basically Peter's stepdad.
Who has the cool magical arrow.
Yes, he's got the arrow. He's also one of the original Guardians cast in the comics. Yondu the Archer is his comic name. When Yondu is found to be disgraced by the Ravager community for trafficking children, which was like Star-Lord, when he was bringing kids to Ego.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up, and against the Ravager code. So he's pretty much like disgraced and not one of them anymore. But he takes the job, and when Yondu ends up finding the ship, captures Rocket and Groot and Nebula, but he does show reluctance to turn Star-Lord over to the Sovereign on his ship when his subordinate, Taserface, who is also a classic Guardians villain from the comics, starts a mutiny with the help from Nebula, who ends up capturing Yondu. We then cut to Ego, where the crew meets Ego's assistant Mantis, and Ego explains that he is a Celestial, an ancient creature who created a humanoid avatar to travel the galaxy because he is actually the planet they're standing on. Quill then learns he can access the power of Ego's planet because he is his son, and Drax, become friendly with Mantis, who reveals that she wants to say something about Ego, but can't say it. Nebula, who is now part of this mutiny on the Ravager's vessel, the Eclector, has captured Groot. They make their mascot and kind of torture him, which is a very sad scene. He's then helped by Kraglin, Sean Gunn's character, by the way, the brother of James Gunn, in retrieving a new arrow controller for Yondu, who then uses it to break out, take control of the ship again. But before that, Nebula does take a ship and leaves the Ravager vessel to go try to get revenge on Gamora. After he gets his arrow back and takes back the ship, They kind of use this risky hyper jump maneuver, try to reach Ego again. Nebula crashes into the planet to kill Gamora, but they reach out an easy alliance when they discover a bunch of skeletal remains beneath Ego's surface. It is then that Mantis tells Drax and Gamora when they meet up that he has been bringing kids here and killing them for like millions of years. And that's what these skeleton remains are. And that they were all his kids. Which is then we see revealed to Star-Lord. When Ego tells him that his plan was to plant a seedling on each planet he traveled to, and would then turn the planet into an extension of himself. But he needed a second Celestial to do so he made Quill, and tells him that every other child he had conceived had been killed trying to access the Celestial power, and Quill was the first one able to access it. And Quill, who was hypnotized by the power, agrees to work with him and turn Earth into a second Ego, but then breaks out of his trance when Ego reveals he intentionally put brain cancer in his mother.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
Yes.
Because he lost his fucking shit.
Yes, it was really good to see. You see Star-Lord just like snap. He just goes, "What?" And then just mega fight breaks out after that. Final showdown against Ego. They plant a bomb inside his core, which is a great fight scene. Very funny bits that lead to the death of the planet.
Oh, so good. Yeah.
And also leads to the unfortunate death of Yondu. Which afterwards we see, there's also a very touching moment where Yondu and Peter become like, he's like, "You're my real dad, Yondu."
Right.
And that kind of thing.
And he gets,
yeah.
That's a good scene.
It is a good
nice.
scene.
It's still funny too. They managed to keep it light.
Yes.
You know?
And afterwards we see Kraglin take up Yondu's Yaka arrow and attempt to control it. And we see a giant space funeral being held by Stakar Ogord, Sylvester Stallone's character, who is moved by Yondu's death after it is revealed, where you see him and his former teammates being the original members of the Guardians of the Galaxy that we talked about last issue.
Oh, that's really cool. I gotta go back and watch so I can appreciate that now.
Yes, and the end scene then shows Aisha of Sovereign near a birth pod with a male being inside, and she decides to name it Adam. This is going to be the plot of the next movie coming up, with the newest member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, Adam Warlock. So,
that'll be interesting.
My impressions of this movie, this definitely kept the charm of the first one going. It's just like, it's a really great movie. You can watch the first and second one right after each other, and they just flow together perfectly. The addition of the new Guardian Mantis is great, and the fact that they hint Adam Warlock got me excited because he's one of my favorite Marvel characters, and he is like something. I was very upset in the first movie when he was not part of the movie. I was like, where the fuck is Adam Warlock? He's a classic Guardian. He's an original Guardians member. So we're gonna get to see that. But yeah, Sylvester Stallone's character Starhawk is like eventually part of like that original Guardians crew that we talked about with Yondu and them, which they mention really awesome. At the end, like Yondu is part of his crew.
That's really cool. Because again, that I bet like every original comic book fan at that point was just kind of like, all right, the movies are they're catering to us too.
Yes,
because I remember that's what like people were afraid of, is that the movies would be so different from, the actual comics that they would, because that's kind of what happened with older Marvel movies like the Ben Affleck Daredevil and like,
even Spider-Man with like the webs coming out of his skin instead of a web shooter.
Right, exactly.
Like that's like a huge thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, people got pissed about that. And I remember when Andrew Garfield was announced, my friend, the first thing he said to me was just kind of like, new Spider-Man with web shooters. And I was like, oh, that really matters to you. Like,
yeah, oh, me too. I was the same way. I was like, he's got web shooters. He showed it in the trailer for us. Yeah. Like, he's got web shooters. It's great. And yeah, Marvel is really good at reinventing these things, but also not forgetting their source material.
Yes.
Like, they do reinvent a lot and change a lot, like putting Ego as Star-Lord's dad, but they still referenced Ego, like, and what he actually is. You know what I mean? Yeah. They just kind of, like, change it a little bit. They reference the original Guardians. Like, they do a good job of that. Which is why I'm very looking forward to an X-Men MCU thing.
Sure, because they haven't been
X-Men's also my
touched.
favorite, so it's just, that's the thing. But, number 4 movie, we got another favorite of mine, Spider-Man Homecoming. In 2017.
Very good. I love Spider-Man.
Yes, everyone loves Spider-Man, and this movie did not disappoint. This was film 4 of Phase 3, film 16 of the MCU, and we finally get Spider-Man after 15 movies. Marvel's most popular hero came swinging into the MCU with a bang with a fantastic film. And for the comic side of this, since we went over Spider-Man already for a little bit we did, we're just going to talk mostly about the villain, which is Vulture.
That's right.
Who is a pretty classic spider foe. Yeah, so in the comics, he was from The Amazing Spider-Man #2 in May of 1963, made by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. This would introduce the Vulture, who was a lean and gaunt older man named Adrian Toomes. So not a lot of people realize that he is not only a classic Spider-Foe, he's his second villain after Green Goblin.
Yeah.
So like Vulture is
I knew he was early, but I didn't know he was second.
Yeah, he's an early guy. Been there a long time. His story in the comics is that he was an electrical engineer who invented a flight harness, and I found out afterwards that his boss and partner that he was working with had been embezzling the company's funds, which left him jobless. To get revenge and, needing money, he decided to turn to crime using his new flight harness under the alias of the Vulture. Vulture is a consistent member of the Sinister Six. He's just always on the team, basically, which is the team that goes up against Spider-Man trying to kill him and defeat him and, just fight Spider-Man in general. This movie also has 2 other Spider-Man villains in it. The Shocker is shown quite a bit in this movie, who is usually the most laughed at Spider-Man character, villain.
I love the Shocker.
Yeah, I actually always thought his costume was really cool as a kid.
Same.
So I was like, "Oh, Shocker's rad," but now I realize that he really is he's a really lame villain.
He's dumb as hell. But I agree. When I was a kid, I always thought why do people make fun of Shocker? He seems like such a dope villain.
Yeah, I mean his power is he's definitely got a dangerous piece of equipment, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
But he's an idiot and he's just I'm a thug. I'm a rob a bank. It's his character, Exactly. He got these big powerful gauntlets that can shake foundations and use and drop a bank. But the other villain is Mac Gargan, aka the Scorpion, makes an appearance in this movie with a visible scorpion tattoo, as well as being called out by name. So they very much let you know, hey, look, the Scorpion's in this universe. Yeah. So who those characters, Scorpion and Shocker, are also both constant members of the Spider Foes and the Sinister Six. So, leading up to that.
I liked in the Spider-Man 2 game, all those years ago, you fought the Shocker, and Spider-Man would just comment about how his outfit looked really cozy, like a pillow or a quilt or something.
You also fought Scorpion in that game.
Yeah, that game was awesome.
That game was great, and there are 2 characters who were not in the movie, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
So this
Mysterio was in it too.
Same with the first Spider-Man movie game did a similar thing where you fought all these characters. There's almost like a Spider-Man movie game universe. You know what I mean? That kind of carried into each other.
Also going on while.
Yeah, it was weird. So the web slinging though, we all know it's so fun.
Oh god, yeah.
So this movie is directed by John Watts, which at this time was pretty much a director of little repute. He hadn't done anything. Just a couple episodes of TV shows. He was handed the Spider-Man trilogy, and I remember people being freaking out about this. Why are you giving a nobody Spider-Man? But he did an excellent job in all 3 movies. And this film has Tom Holland reprising his role as Spider-Man from Civil War, alongside Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, Jon Favreau's Happy Hogan. We met Jacob Batalon as Ned Leeds, his best friend, and Zendaya as MJ. The film's antagonist would be Vulture, played by the awesome actor favorite of mine, Michael Keaton.
Gotta love Michael Keaton.
Who made a guest appearance in Morbius to let everyone know it's Morbid time. Anyway, the film opens up showing the United States Department of Damage Control cleaning up the aftermath of the Battle of New York from the Avengers movie. And this drives Adrian Toomes' small salvage company out of business. Toomes' crew keeps an alien Chitauri tech secret and ends up using them to further a criminal agenda, which we don't get to see much about now, but you see that's where he gets all his tech from.
Yeah.
Flash forward 4 years, you get to see Toomes in his Vulture flight suit, and the rest of the crew making weapons like the shock gauntlets out of Chitauri tech. Sometime later, we see Peter Parker resuming his studies after Tony Stark tells him he's not ready to be an Avenger after the Civil War, and Peter Parker ends up quitting his school's decathlon team, much to the chagrin of Aunt May, in order to spend more time on his Stark Industries internship, quote unquote, which is a cover for being Spider-Man. After stopping some of the Vulture's goons from robbing an ATM, he goes in full costume to find his best friend Ned in his room, where his secret is revealed. Ned tells Peter, his love interest Liz Allen, that he knows Spider-Man. He tells his high school crush, hey, Peter knows Spider-Man. And Peter is forced to go to a party as Spider-Man with her that night. But while getting into the Spidey costume, he comes across Toomes' associate, Herman Schultz, and Jackson Bryce. Bryce, who holds up the Shocker Gauntlet and hits Spider-Man with it, who gets defeated and launched into a river, but gets rescued by Iron Man. Later, angry with Bryce for jeopardizing the mission, Vulture accidentally kills him with an experimental weapon, giving the gauntlets to Herman Schultz, a.k.a. the Shocker. Peter picks up a weapon left behind and removes the power core with the help of Ned, leading Shocker to his school when they look for where the lost tech was. Peter and Ned manage to evade the Shocker walking across the school, and end up not only evading him, but planting a tracker on Shocker himself, leading them all the way to Maryland, which causes Parker to rejoin the decathlon team for an excuse to go to Washington, D.C., where their finals are. Where he also disables his suit tracker so Tony can't see him leave the state. He tries to stop Vulture and Marilyn from stealing weapons, but ends up being overpowered and trapped inside a damage control truck, causing him to miss the Decathlon Nationals, but he is led to Washington Monument just in time to save his friends from a falling elevator, being sabotaged by Agent Toomes' crazy people. Back in New York City, Parker learns of the Vulture's location and manages to capture the group's buyer on the Staten Island ferry, one Mac Gargan, aka the Scorpion. But he, in the process, botches this FBI operation that was in place to arrest them all. Vulture avoids Peter's attempts to shut down a weapon and rips the ferry in half, which is then saved by a combined effort of Spider-Man and Iron Man. Stark punishes him for recklessness by taking back his suit, and Peter begins concentrating on school life, giving up the idea of being Spider-Man. However, that doesn't last long, though, for on the night of the school dance, where he gets to go on a date with his crush, Liz, he goes to her house to pick her up, and it's revealed that Liz's father is none other than Adrian Toomes, the Vulture. During the ride to the school dance, Toomes puts together that Peter is Spider-Man, realizing where he's been and everything. And once Liz leaves the car, he tells him that he will spare his life because he saved Liz in D.C., but if he goes back to being Spider-Man and interferes with his plans again, he will show no mercy. During the day,
I love that scene.
Yes, that's such a great scene. Like the villain, the whole car ride is so great. You just keep seeing like the Vulture look up in the rearview mirror and like looking at Peter, looking at him through the rearview mirror. Like it's so great.
I don't know if I'm an idiot or if I wasn't the only one, but I had no idea Toomes was going to be her father.
No. It was completely like you had no idea.
Yeah, it was such a good reveal. Like when he was at the door and he's just like, "Hey, what's up?" And you're like, "No fucking way."
Yeah, no, that was never. I don't think anything hints at that the whole movie. I think it's a big drop. Like, oh shit, he says that's her dad. During the dance, though, Peter realizes Vulture's plan is going to be to steal a Stark cargo plane transporting weapons from Avengers Tower to the Avengers headquarters, and ends up donning his homemade Spider-Man suit, races to the Vulture's lair to confront him, but he is ambushed at the school by Shocker, but he does end up defeating him with the help of Ned, and then ends up going to the Vulture and having a final battle with the Vulture on the beach, which of course culminates in a victory for Spider-Man, because it's a Spider-Man movie. Peter then learns that Liz is moving away due to her father being in prison, and Michelle Jones, aka MJ, is taking her place as a president of the decathlon team. Happy informs Peter he's invited to the Avengers facility, and Stark offers him a more advanced suit, which is the Iron Spider suit, and the invitation to join the Avengers. Parker, however, declines the invitation to the Avengers and chooses to be more of a, quote, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, end quote, and inspires Tony to propose to Pepper Potts instead at the big meeting. Upon returning home, Peter learns that Tony has upgraded his suit and puts it on, while Aunt May is behind him the whole time, ending the movie in a reveal that Aunt May witnesses him as Spider-Man.
That was a good way to end
Yes, it was. She just goes, "What the fuck?" And then the credits start. It was fantastic. But the end credit scene is you get to see Vulture in prison speaking to Scorpion, where they band together to stop the Spider-Man.
The Spider-Man.
So this movie was great for two reasons. Two major reasons I think this movie's great. One, it's not an origin story of Spider-Man, which we already had. We already had two of. So
yeah,
we're done with that. Second, it's a great slice of Spidey life instead of being a world-shattering plot. Like everything in Phase 3, with the exception of I think Spider-Man and Black Panther, is like the world's gonna end. Like the world's gonna fucking end. Like if this doesn't happen, so Spider-Man really was like, oh, he's just neighborhood Spider-Man, helping out, fighting baddies.
Yeah, there's just like he's just stopping a thieving plot.
Yeah, basically stopping a weapons dealer from like making weapons. You know what I mean? Like
it's not the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah, like of course it would have been hugely detrimental down the line, but like at the moment it wasn't going to break the world in half.
Yeah.
So you like this movie, right? You're a fan of Spider-Man: Homecoming?
Oh, absolutely. I just like Spider-Man movies in general. I think Peter Parker is such a charismatic character. I think he's like, again, when you have somebody who starts off as a young kid and who grows into his own, it's just a nice. That like I'm excited for where they're going for the next Spider-Man movie.
100%.
Because like now Peter Parker is no longer like a little kid. You know what I mean? Like he's done with high school. He's moving on. And they'll probably, I hope they do some kind of time skip where they're a little bit older,
I don't think they're going to do a time skip except for actual time passing. But I do think he's probably going to be in college. I'm really hoping that in this next movie we get to see the romance with Black Cat. That's the thing I really want to see. Because for reasons we'll talk about when we get to Spider-Man, MJ's out of the picture for now, kind of. You know what I mean? She's in the movie, though. Exactly. It is confirmed. Zendaya's in the movie. Also, the title trademarked Spider-Man vs. Venom also makes me happy.
Yeah.
So, next we have the fifth film, which is Thor Ragnarok, which is one of my favorite movies of MCU. Definitely in my top 5. It's just a comedy
and the way
movie.
It ends is not funny.
No, the way it ends is a little depressing. So film 5 of Phase 3, film 17 of the MCU, and film 3 of the Thor trilogy, we get Thor Ragnarok. This film is a fantastic movie that I think is one of the best in the entire MCU. It really changed the Thor movies for a new direction from the previous film Dark World. And for the comics, we're going to go over 2 characters introduced, the villain Hela and the hero Valkyrie. So in the comics, Hela is the daughter of Loki, but the thing here is it's not our Loki. It's a different Loki from the previous universe, from a previous Asgardian Ragnarok. So, like, she was left over in the land of the dead, gets discovered by Odin, and or left over, in Jotunheim, is discovered by Odin and given the title of Goddess of the Dead. She then first appeared in the comic Journey into the Mystery 102 in March 1964, made by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Hela often tries to take over Asgard to expand her domain, but is usually stopped by Thor, Loki, or Odin. She's pretty minor in the comics, I would say. Like, she's really powerful, but she's not like a major villain a lot.
Right.
She was a big part of a very recent comic event in 2020 where Thor's sister Angela, which you might know from the Spawn comics, she's now part of Marvel. She's a pretty major character now. She's Thor's sister. Her name is Angela. She's the leader of the Angels from the 10th realm, the secret 10th realm known as Heaven, where she recently dethroned Hela, kicking her out of Hell, and took over Hell herself. And which led Hela to become a member of the Black Order, aka the Children of Thanos, alongside characters such as Proxima Midnight and Ebony Maw and Corvus Glaive that we all see in the Avengers Infinity War and Endgame movies. He kind of she joins them, and she's with them now. So it's very weird. But yeah, that's kind of her in the comics. That's all I have for her. She's just a constant villain that shows up. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we need a magical villain.
Here.
It's Hela. You know what I mean? Like, she's not a huge deal. Next, we have a much bigger deal which started in Avengers 83 in 1970 by Roy Thomas and John Buscema, created the character Valkyrie as a guise for the villain Enchantress. But later in 1981, Thomas brought back the character as the Valkyrie persona as it was put in the mortal soul named Samantha Parrington as an adversary to the Hulk in The Incredible Hulk number 2, volume 2, number 142. It was in the Defenders number 4 when we would meet the Valkyrie that a lot of us know today, which would be a mortal woman named Barbara Norris who gets the spirit of Valkyrie inside of her and becomes a longtime Defender. Valkyrie is a spirit, like a power, that inhabits a body in the comics, who from the leader of the Valkyrie, Brunhilde. And after being trapped by Amora the Enchantress, her body suspended for eternity, Amora uses her soul and puts them into people for reasons, I don't know, weird reasons.
Got it.
So she used it on Barbara, who got trapped in a magical dimension, to help her escape and help her fellow Defenders out. But the Enchantress did not dispel the power afterwards, and the spirit of Brunhilde continued to inhabit the body of Barbara, which basically erased Barbara's identity. She just became Brunhilde. And Barbara ends up even getting killed, never getting her body back. But her mind is freed, and with the help of Doctor Strange, gets reunited with the body of Brunhilde, who becomes whole again, but instead of becoming leader of the Valkyries, he decides to just go back to Earth and become a Defender, because she had such a great time with them over the years.
Aww.
Which, by the way, Doctor Strange is the leader of the Defenders in the comics, which is why he's involved.
That's dope.
So recently, in the War of the Realm story, she got decapitated by Malekith. I don't know if she's been back already. I haven't read that, if she has, but last I saw, she got her head chopped off. So she's dead. But,
that sucks.
But
oh well.
Valkyrie is a major character, and we see her again in Avengers, and we know in the next Thor movie she's going to be a major character as well, which comes out in 2 weeks, which hurts my brain. But yeah, she's a big character in the comics. She's in a lot of Defender stuff. She's in a lot of Avengers stuff. She's in a lot of Thor stuff. You'll see Valkyrie all over the place throughout the 2000s and the 90s. So now we're gonna go to the movie. Now this movie is directed by one of my favorite people in existence, Taika Waititi, who at the time of this movie was known for his comedy faux documentary film What We Do in the Shadows, and it was basically all he had done at this point. And he was brought.
He's like,
yes, now
he's like the world's sweetheart.
He is the world's sweetheart. He's got like a golden touch right now. Basically, everything he touches is just like this hilarious masterpiece, and not just in comedy. Like in every, he's so good at making movies, cinematography, everything. But this movie stars Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston as Thor and Loki again. Idris Elba returns as Heimdall. Mark Ruffalo returns as the Hulk. And it introduces Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, Jeff Goldblum as the Grand Master, Karl Urban as Scourge, and Kate Blanchett as Hela. And we can't forget about Korg, the Rock Man, played by Taika Waititi.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, probably the best character, who also, because of this, he was invented for this movie, but now he's a major comic character, which is hilarious, just because he's so popular. So this movie opens up with Thor being held captive in the realm of Muspelheim, the bottom of the tree, where Surtur, the Lord of the Realm, teases Thor from his cage, telling him that he is no longer on Asgard, and says Odin is no longer in Asgard, and says Thor's absence has left Asgard vulnerable for an invasion. Thor gets a little irritated when he mentions that Surtur says, once I get to Odin's vault and reunite with the eternal flame, I will begin Ragnarok. Thor immediately breaks out, fights off Surtur's minions before just immediately killing Surtur as if it's not a problem, and then takes his crown as a trophy, which, keep in mind, Surtur's like a major Marvel villain, so that was crazy that they just did that. So when he asks for, a Bifrost home, Heimdall doesn't answer him. And we then see in Asgard, Heimdall's replacement, Scourge, only noticing when a woman he is trying to impress notices that, like the Bifrost is blinking.
Right.
Scourge tells Thor that Heimdall is on the run and that he was declared enemy of the people. Thor then finds Odin, quote unquote, but quickly sees through his deception, knowing it is actually Loki, in a very hilarious scene with Matt Damon.
That's right.
Playing Loki as an actor in a stage play showing the glory of Loki. So he figures,
so fucking
yeah, it's so out of nowhere. He finds out that Loki is Odin, and he says, "We got to go find Dad. Like, where's Odin?" So they go to Earth to find their father, and they quickly find that the retirement home that Loki put Odin in was demolished, which also is hilarious. And suddenly Loki gets taken away in a portal, leaving a business card with Thor to find Bleecker Street, home of Doctor Strange. Thor explains that they are simply trying to find Odin, and Strange reveals his whereabouts, but asks that Odin told Doctor Strange that he did not want to be disturbed. He then sends Thor and Loki to his location in Norway, where they find him, but he is dying. His last moments, he makes a confession that Hela, the sister they never knew they had, will be released from a prison when Odin dies. Odin passes away, turning into energy when Hela immediately shows up and attacks Thor and Loki when they refuse to kneel to her. Thor throws his hammer Mjolnir, which she then catches and shatters in one hand with no issue. And when they call for a Bifrost to leave, Hela jumps in, kicking the brothers out, arriving at Asgard without them and immediately killing Thor's friends Volstagg and Fandral, and recruits Scourge to her side. Thor is then thrown off into Sakaar, an alien planet which is basically covered in trash. It's like a giant junk planet. There we see Thor get captured in a net, but a drunk woman climbing out of a ship claims him to be hers and frees him by beating the scavenger's back, but does put a disc on his neck, which allowing her to electrocute him and knock him unconscious. We then cut to Asgard, where we see Hela take over the kingdom with little issue, killing Hogun, the last of Thor's friends, and resurrects an army of undead Asgardian soldiers and her pet, the wolf god Fenris. Scourge then becomes his comic self as her executioner. In the comics, he's known as Scourge the Executioner. And is then revealed that Heimdall has been organizing a resistance against her. Also, Scourge is played by Carl Urban, who's one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
Butcher from The Boys.
Carl Urban.
Éomer from Lord of the Rings. Fantastic. And Bones from Star Trek. Fantastic actor. And he's so good as Scourge in this.
Oh, yeah. He's so funny.
Thor then wakes up as a gladiator on Sakaar, who will be pit up against the champion of the Grand Master, an ancient being who runs the gladiator games on this planet. Which he has the name The Grand Master, which may sound a bit familiar to The Collector from the Guardians movie, because they're the same species.
Oh yeah, they look alike.
Yes, they do. They're like the ancient council of space that like rules space, basically. They're like the original. I think they're like the last of the people who inhabited the last universe or something. It's something crazy like that.
I didn't even put two and two together.
Yeah.
I feel silly.
Thor is thrown into the gladiator quarters, where he meets his two soon-to-be best friends, Korg, an Kronan resistance fighter, and his friend Meek, a little tiny bug. Thor then recognizes the woman who got him there as Valkyrie, but she says she has no concern for the plight of Asgard. And when Thor fights in the arena, he against the champion of the Grand Master, is revealed to be none other than the Hulk, who won't listen to Thor when he tries to speak to him at first, making them fight. Thor gets nearly defeated, but he then has a vision of Odin, which causes him his god powers to activate, defeating the Hulk with little issue, but is knocked out by a disc on his neck to keep Hulk the champion. When he wakes up, he's in a luxurious apartment with Hulk, who's nude, by the way, who refuses to go home because he thinks Earth hates him. He is then shown to be friends with Valkyrie, and Thor, with the help of Hulk, managed to get the control device for the disc from Valkyrie. Thor then discovers the Quinjet that brought him there is damaged and can't fly anymore, but Hulk sees a video of Black Widow trying to calm him down inside, and then transforms back into Bruce for the first time in years since the Ultron battle. I think it's been 4 years. So,
I think so.
Yeah, he was Hulk for a long time. Loki is in order to track them down and meets up with the Valkyrie, and they find out that the rest of the Valkyries died ages ago to the hands of Hela. Soon, they organize a slave revolt with Korg being the leader of the revolt, and they steal the Grand Master's ship before getting inevitably betrayed by Loki, but Loki ends up being outsmarted by Thor, knowing he would try this. Loki is then stunned by the disc that used to be on Thor. He put on Loki, and he says to Loki, "He knew he would always be the god of mischief, but I hoped you would have some capacity for growth." That's a stinging sentence, which Loki takes
Yeah,
to heart.
Yeah, it's true.
Thor and Valkyrie then steal the ship and leave with Banner, while Loki is rescued by Korg and the rest of the slaves steal a very large ship they have. Thor and Valkyrie, with the help of Hulk, attack Asgard, trying to get it back. And Fenris, the god of wolves, meets them on the big rainbow bridge.
Right.
Banner hulks out and takes care of the god of wolf basically with no issues. Loki arrives later with Korg and the rest of the former slaves to help Thor take on Hela's forces and allow the Asgardian refugees led by Heimdall to get back on the ship. Thor is overpowered by Hela, but has a vision of Odin telling him that he is not the god of hammers, making him realize his true power as he becomes the newly awakened Thor and defeats Hela's army with no issues. He and Loki decide to begin Ragnarok to stop Hela, where Loki retrieves Surtur's crown from the vault, places it with the Eternal Flame, and while he's there, decides to swipe his favorite cosmic cube.
Yeah, why not?
Surtur awakes to destroy Asgard with Hela in it, wiping them out. You actually see, I think, Surtur's sword fall on top of Hela.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, she gets fucking annihilated. With Valkyrie, Loki, and Korg, they begin a trip back to Earth, but soon we see the ship is overshadowed by a massive ship, being none other than the flagship of Thanos.
Yeah, sad ending.
Yeah. So, this film is great. I fucking love Ragnarok. It is still hilarious. It's just it's a comedy film. It's more of a comedy film than even Guardians was. Like, it's just never stops being absurd. Which is
There's like a lot of dumb, stupid humor, like Thor screaming while getting transported, like the ball scene when he's talking to Valkyrie, and Hulk and how he just pegs himself in the face.
Yeah.
Like all these like tiny little moments that just make such a powerful, all strong, dramatic character humbled.
And the look of impression on Thor's face when he sees what's probably Hulk's giant penis.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of humor and stuff is like needed for Thor. Because Thor is just too ridiculous. It's too ridiculous of a concept to put in, like they tried to do with Dark World, to make it like this like Lord of the Rings style like fantasy epic. Like that doesn't like work well with MCU. That's too far. You know what I mean? Like
like it has to have levity to it.
Yeah, because it's just like these characters and the audience being from Earth and seeing these gods playing around with aliens in space is just absurd.
Right. So just let people accept that and move on, as opposed to like making it such a focal point.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it'll just take people out of it.
Yeah, like it's just Taika Waititi basically directed Thor in such a great way that now he's, doing the sequel to Love with Thunder, which comes out again like with 2 weeks, which is crazy. And he's Korg, who's like a main character in the next one too. So that's exciting.
It's exciting.
It's exciting. Oh, yes, real exciting.
I'm made from rooks.
Made of rooks. Oh, there goes a bit of me, just fell off.
Made from rooks.
So the next movie, which is the final one of today, the first of the MCU in 2018, is our 6th movie today, Black Panther. So this is the 6th part of Phase 3, the 18th film of the MCU. Black Panther brought a hero we saw introduced in Civil War to a solo film, one of Marvel's greatest heroes as well, being brought to the front screen with like his own title. For the comics, we're going to go over the villains Killmonger and Claw, because again, we already went over Black Panther.
Right.
So first, we're going to talk about Claw, who is arguably the arch nemesis of Black Panther. He's obsessed with stealing vibranium from Wakanda. He's from Fantastic Four number 53, 1966, the same issue as Black Panther. And he is the son of a Nazi war criminal who was sent to Wakanda to learn their secrets. After the war, he would raise his son on tales of the great nation of Wakanda and how great it was and their treasures and stuff like that. Very typical, they're German, but very typical, I guess, German or British, old age safari cap explorer in Africa kind of guy. Right. That's what his dad was. Super just racist, the dark continent of Africa, those people.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
okay.
So that was his dad. So Claw would grow up as a physicist, and he would end up stealing vibranium and the power to power his sound transducer device, which was his big lifetime achievement thing.
Oh, good for him, I guess.
Claw would come into conflict, however, with T'Chaka, the ruler of the nation, due to his theft, and he ends up killing T'Chaka in cold blood. The then adolescent T'Challa, who was there, witnessed his dad die and removes Claw's right hand.
Oh, so that's how he loses it in that version.
Yeah. So Claw resurfaces with a sonic gun in his right wrist and tries to get more vibranium, but is stopped by Black Panther in the first issue, and he would then show up as a recurring member alongside Zemo on the Masters of Evil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Claw has to this day never stopped showing up. He is like the main villain of Black Panther for that reason, obviously. I mean, not only is he his first villain, but he killed his dad, so he's doesn't like the guy. Yeah, he's a Master of Evil. So it's like that's like the classic like Legion of Doom for Marvel, like all the bad guys teaming up, trying to stop the Avengers. So that was his role. So next in Jungle Action, back to that comic, in numbers 6 to 8, we see a new villain, Eric Killmonger, arrive, being created by Don McGregor and Rich Buckler. Killmonger was a native Wakandan named Ndaka, whose parents were killed by raiders, led by traders from Wakanda who sold their secrets for a life of luxury outside of Wakanda to Ulysses Claw. He was then taken and raised abroad by hateful caretakers and given a new name, Eric, which was then a gifted intellect. When he grew up, which he was abused by his father physically, but his father also abused his intelligence to get him to like steal things for him and stuff.
Right.
As he got older, he would do what you do in that situation and murder his parents. When he found out that they killed his birth parents. He would then, after killing his adoptive father, strive out on as a mercenary, working through a bunch of jobs, including working for Kingpin for a long time.
Oh, shit.
Until eventually he would return to Wakanda and would lead a coup during one of Black Panther's many forays away from home with the Avengers. He also picked up the name Killmonger during this time, as he would kill a lot of people.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's that. He would take over Wakanda, but he'd eventually be defeated, and he remains to this day a pretty constant villain to Black Panther and other characters, other Wakandan characters. The character, I don't know if she was introduced in this movie. I should have looked it up for this, but Okoye, the woman, who's honestly probably my number one Marvel wife, she's pretty big in the comics now. I don't know if she was invented for this movie. She might have been. Because I don't remember her existing. The Dora Milaje, like with a group that she's part of, like always existed. Yeah. But I don't think there was like a named main one, you know?
Well,
and now
it's always nice to add something new.
Yeah, but she's very popular. I think she has her own comic series now. Like she's a popular character, and I think she fights like Killmonger and stuff too. It's like all the Wakandan characters like fight Killmonger.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So now we're going to the movie, which was this movie, Black Panther, came out in 2018. It was directed by Ryan Coogler, known for his previous smash hit Creed, which is a movie I love.
I like Creed a lot.
Yeah, Creed
too.
is fantastic. This would bring the amazing talent of this movie alongside Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther, Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, Andy Serkis as Claw, Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia. Danai Gurira, I think it's how you say it. That's Okoye. Letitia White as Shuri, Martin Freeman as Everett Ross, and Winston Duke as M'Baku. So, M'Baku, aka the White Gorilla. That's his supervillain name.
Yeah, the big boy.
Yeah.
The big fella.
Yeah, we start this movie starts 2 centuries ago. Starts learning that many centuries ago that 5 African tribes warred over a meteorite made up of alien metal known as vibranium, and a warrior shaman named Bashenga ingested a heart-shaped herb affected by this metal, like that grew around them where the metal crashed, and became the first Black Panther. And united all tribes except the Jabari tribe and formed the nation of Wakanda. As time passes, the Wakandans use the vibranium to develop advanced technology while isolating themselves and posing as a third world country. In 1992, shout out 92, we see T'Chaka visit his brother N'Jobu in Oakland, California, where he accuses him of assisting Claw in stealing vibranium. His suspicions are confirmed, and N'Jobu is exiled. In present day, T'Challa returns to Wakanda a week after the death of his father T'Chaka at the hands of Baron Zemo from Civil War, and assumes the throne of Wakanda. Later, he ingests the liquid to remove the effects of the heart-shaped herb, making him a normal human again, and invites anyone to challenge the throne in ritual combat, where M'Baku of the Jabari tribe claims he isn't worthy, and they engage, but even without his powers, he bests M'Baku and spares his life. He is then crowned...
He's just that good.
Yes, he's that good of a fighter. He is then crowned king and drinks the fluid from the heart-shaped herb. We then see Claw steal a vibranium artifact from the Museum of Great Britain. When Wakanda hears of this, Black Panther, Okoye, and his love interest Nakia plan to intercept Claw at a casino, where they discover the buyer is a CIA agent, Reverend Everett Ross, who they met in Civil War. They then intervene and start a shootout, chase Claw across the city, and then end up handing him over to the CIA, where Black Panther almost kills him on camera, but stops and spares his life, turning him over to the CIA. Claw is then rescued by his crew members, Eric Stevens, while Panther and the others save Ross, who got injured protecting Okoye, taking him back to Wakanda, where his sister Shuri uses their tech to save him. In Wakanda, T'Challa learns that of his uncle, N'Jobu, who was killed by his father when confronted with selling vibranium with the goal of giving it to people of African descent across the world to fight their oppressors. And he learns that he had a son named Eric, who was an American Black Ops soldier with the moniker Killmonger. We then see Killmonger kill Claw, living up to his name, I guess, and taking his body back to Wakanda, revealing his identity and challenging T'Challa for the throne. This time, however, T'Challa loses and is hurled over the waterfall by Killmonger, who claims the throne and ingests the heart-shaped herb, taking over Wakanda for himself. After that, he then orders the rest of the heart-shaped herb to be destroyed. Nakia, Shuri, Everett Ross, and T'Challa's mother Ramonda flee to the Jabari tribe for aid and learn that M'Baku is caring for a comatose T'Challa, who they found in the river as repayment for sparing M'Baku's life. They feed the heart-shaped herb brought by Ramonda to T'Challa, who then awakens, and they all return to Wakanda to take it back after he goes in a crazy, trippy state where he talks to his dad about everything happening.
Yeah. That's right.
They end up with the help of the Jabari tribe and the elite Dora Milaje to fight against Wakanda's army, eventually leading to a one-on-one fight between Black Panther and Killmonger, which ends with the victorious Black Panther stabbing Killmonger with a dagger to the chest, who chooses to die a free man rather than be saved and incarcerated.
Yeah, which is sad that we won't see more of him.
The film ends with Wakanda ending its isolation and opening up an embassy in Oakland, California, where Shuri and Nakia run the embassy. We then later see Bucky wake up in Wakanda, being met with Shuri, who begins undoing his mental programming. And that's the end of Black Panther. Great movie.
I like it a lot.
Such a fantastic movie. Also, I think the only Marvel movie to be nominated for an Oscar.
That's right, actually.
Yeah, it's really good. It's just a very solid film. Great message, great casting, great people in it. So it's very sad we're not going to get to see more Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger or more Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther, because he did pass away 2 years ago.
Rest in peace, which is so sad, because he was such a young, besides
he's healthy seeming,
Yeah.
Like, no one knew he had stage 4 colon cancer. Like, that was crazy. It was such a surprise that happened.
But man, like, what a great fucking character. He brought it to life. He had such a great charm to him too. He was like cocky, but like fun loving, and again, Black Panther was just, what makes, one of the reasons why it makes it so good is because it's a very, kind of like what you said with Spider-Man, it's like its own isolated story.
Yep.
Where like it doesn't involve everything crazy going on with other characters, although there's connections to it, of course. Like Claw was in Ultron, all the vibraniums references to like Captain America and other countries and the trading stuff. Like, it gives you that, like, it's just like, this country was hidden from everybody for years, so of course nobody found it.
Yeah.
Like that's why we haven't seen anything from Wakanda. Although they mentioned Wakanda in, what was it?
Iron Man 2.
Winter Soldier? Iron Man 2.
Yeah,
right?
they mentioned Wakanda.
So it's like, it's dropped.
Yeah, something we've always known about, but even then they didn't know the extent of Wakanda. Like, S.H.I.E.L.D. boasts and Nick Fury boasts all that fancy tech. It was nothing compared to, it was the Iron Age compared to Wakanda. Like, if they didn't want you to see him, you
so
didn't
funny.
see him. That's the bottom line of it. And it's a great movie. And there is rumors that Michael B. Jordan will be replacing Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther,
would be wild.
which would be fantastic, either through multiverse reasons or just recasting reasons. Like, I don't
care.
Disney made this big statement saying they're not going to recast Black Panther, but then Chadwick Boseman's family is like, what? Like, please recast him. Like, we want you to recast him. Like, you can't let the Black Panther just die. Like, T'Challa is too big of a deal to too many people. Like, he has to, like, keep going. Which I agree with. He's too big of a deal.
I don't know why Disney lately has been saying that kind of stuff. They've been on a very anti-recast place. And I'm like, it's fine, because like the Solo movie, you know?
Yes.
And they were like, oh, we shouldn't have recast Han Solo. And I was like, why not? He did great.
I thought he was great. I did too. I like that movie. I'm a fan of that movie. But yeah, that's not what. Yeah, it's. I hope we get Black Panther 2 is coming soon. And it's a huge movie. Like, it's gonna be another, like, Civil War, like, style movie.
With a bunch of other characters coming in.
Yeah, we think it's gonna introduce Namor and Doctor Doom. So
okay.
That'll be a big. Because it's called, it's the name of the movie is like the plot or whatever is in the comics, the big war when Wakanda, Latveria, and Atlantis all go to war with each other.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
So we'll see what they do with that. But yeah, that's the last movie for today's episode. We went through 6 films.
Rock and roll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, the phase 3 is great.
Phase 3 is great. It's a lot. I mean, it's obviously, it's easy to say it's the best phase because it's got Avengers 3 and 4, which is just like, those movies together are just a masterpiece. So it's really easy to say it's the best phase, which I mean, I think it is, you know?
Right. I like, again, from like some technical standpoints, I remember being a little bit confused in Civil War because they moved through a lot of information very quickly. But like, but that's like the only real complaint. And Guardians of the Galaxy 2 I've seen twice, but it's one of those movies that doesn't stick with me super hard. Like, it's not something that I'm like, I have to, every now and again I'll go like, oh yeah, shit, his dad was a Celestial. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's kind of like I said when I talked about Guardians. So like, you can watch those movies back to back and they kind of blend together. But I like the movie just because it's a funny space fighting movie, you know.
Oh,
but
it's definitely I like all these movies.
But like, I don't. That, like, I'm with you though. Like, I don't think Guardians 2 is. I think I've seen it twice too. Like, I don't think it really like. It doesn't really blow the envelope up. Like, the first Guardians was like incredible. You know what I mean? Right. So I think it was a hard act to follow.
Expecting that. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because it follows a second one can only be a second one rule. Like, you know, it doesn't. Not all things are like that. Empire Strikes Back was
100%.
Arguably better than A New Hope, you know, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
So,
you know what I mean?
But yeah, we have 5 movies for the next part, which is going to be the final part of Phase 3, which we're going to start off with Infinity War, then we do Ant-Man and Wasp, then Captain Marvel, then Endgame, and then Spider-Man Far From Home.
That's right. That's the end of Phase 3, which is interesting. But it makes sense after you watch it.
Also, just like, I'll probably do a side episode on it maybe, but just like while I'm here, the Netflix shows. They all came out during Phase 2 and 3. I didn't even talk about it last time. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and Defenders, and then Punisher. Those shows are great. They're all on Disney Plus now, and they're basically like they're still canon. Basically, that's kind of like what we're learning.
Yeah.
Like, all these actors are coming back to like reprise these roles soon. Another Daredevil show is coming soon. So,
yeah, that's exciting.
Like, get hyped for that. But I just wanted to mention that. Like, that's also happening. I might talk about it as some separate special part to these MCU and U part, like, you know, things.
Okie dokie.
This is going to be a whole series. There's going to be so many MCU and U's.
Right.
Like, this is just part 3 going into the movies. You're going to talk about the shows. What if, you know, there's so many different things to talk about. So,
there is.
Yeah, that's the end of today's episode, guys. Thanks for listening to me rant about Marvel again.
I appreciate it. Thanks for covering this.
Yeah, we're not going to be doing an episode next week, but it's my birthday week, and I'll be gone for that day. But we will be back the next week. I think a Pat episode? Is that correct?
Yeah, I can definitely do that over the next 2 weeks for sure.
Yeah.
Because I already know what I want to do, and I've been working on it for a little while.
Perfect. We'll do that. We'll be back with a Pat episode in 2 weeks. Everyone, thanks for listening live. If you're listening on YouTube, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.